Good morning, everybody. My name is Richard Armitage. It's great to see so many of you on the call. And I think that the reason for that is obvious. Cargo bikes, especially electric assist ones, are more and more being adopted by businesses of all shapes and sizes. And the object today, this morning, is to introduce you to some of the themes around business use of e-cargo bikes. And as the Executive Director of the European Cyclogistics Federation, I'll try and bring in some other points from all across Europe as well. I'd like to just say a few words from my sponsor. I'm a project partner in the City Changer Cargo Bike project, which is funded through the Horizon 2020 program of the European Union. And we have over 18 cities involved with that across Europe. And if you want to know more about that, have a look at cyclogistics.eu. Now, without further ado, we're going to get cracking. First up is Emily Harrop. Emily and I have got to know each other very well over the last year because she leads on e-cargo bikes in her council, Colchester Borough. And without further ado, the floor is yours, Emily.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and talk to you today about our e-cargo bike project in Colchester. Next slide, please. So I thought I'd start by giving a little bit of background to our project. So when we were putting our bid together to the Energy Saving Trust, we were only aware of one e-cargo bike in Colchester, and that was a Bullet owned by a local doctor who used it for all of his travel and also for carrying his elderly dog around on the front when it got tired on a walk. So we knew that we needed to sort of start from scratch. So our objectives for the project were around breaking down the barriers to e-cargo bike take-up and being able to demonstrate to local businesses that e-cargo bikes were a viable alternative for local and last mile deliveries. We also wanted to put a third strand onto our project that was around encouraging healthier lifestyles amongst delivery drivers through converting them to using bikes, e-bikes and e-cargo bikes. Next slide, please. So we were successful in securing £137,000 from the Energy Saving Trust, and with that we've bought 24 electric cargo bikes and 5 electric trailers. We've got 6 brands and 14 types of bikes to trial. Absolutely key to our project is our 10 project champions. Because we knew that e-cargo bikes weren't a familiar sight in Colchester, we wanted to have a number of bikes that were regularly seen around Colchester, very visual, and that would help us promote the project. So as we were putting our bid together, we approached over 40 local businesses to see whether they'd be interested in a long-term loan of a bike. 10 local businesses and organisations came forward, and we worked with them to identify which bike would be most appropriate for their business needs, and then we built that into our bid. So our 10 project champions have got a long-term loan of their preferred bike, and in exchange they give us monthly feedback and they help us with our publicity and marketing, and they basically act as a champion. They talk to people, talk to other businesses, tell people about their bikes and how they're using them, and generally help us break down the barriers to getting others to consider using an e-cargo bike. We've also got 4 Colchester Borough Council teams using them, and then we have a pool of 6 which are available for short-term loan of 1 to 3 months for any local business or organisation to try out. Next slide, please. So I thought it would be useful to just go through a few case studies from a few of our champions that are using the bikes quite extensively. So first of all, we've got the Norwegian Bakers, a small independent vegan bakery, and they opted to go for a Christiania. So they were doing some deliveries before COVID by car, but obviously with COVID, a delivery service became absolutely critical to business continuity. So they use their Christiania for doing regular deliveries within a few miles of Wivenhoe, where they're based. They also use it to transport their produce to the local farmers markets. And since they've had the Christiania, they have reduced their car use from using 2 cars to 1 car. They're really very passionate about extending how much they do by e-cargo bike, and they're also planning to supplement using their own bike with the local e-cargo bike delivery service that's just been set up. They really are keen to extend their range. they're concerned about the battery, the reliability of the range that it provides, and how far it can go. So that's something they're looking at. But they're also aware that it takes a little bit more timing, planning and logistics to consider doing more by bike rather than by car in the rural areas that they're serving. But they're very, very passionate about using the e-cargo bike more, and we're looking forward to seeing how they develop over the summer. Next slide, please. So next up, we have Wivenhoe Town Council. They've got two bikes. They've got the Urban Arrow Shorty and a Tender 1500 pickup trike. They've had the Urban Arrow Shorty for quite some time, and Michael's been using it for litter picking, emptying bins, doing maintenance and checking public facilities. He's been averaging about 150 miles a month, and actually most of this he was mainly doing on foot before. So the cargo bikes made a huge difference to his working day. He can cover a lot larger area, he can carry all his equipment with him, and he's able to work a lot more efficiently. The Urban Arrow pickup's taken a little bit more getting used to. It's a very large trike, a little bit more tricky to manoeuvre, but they're gradually using it more and more, and it's beginning to replace some van journeys. He's also using it to support, to womble, as he calls it. There's a local litter picking group called the Wombles, and he uses the pickup to go and collect the larger pieces of furniture and things that get fly tipped and difficult to carry. Next slide, please. Next up, we have Repair, Reuse, Recycle CIC and their Route 51 project. And they've got the biggest trike. This is an Urban Arrow Tender 2500. With the double flatbed bed. So Chris has been using this since November. He uses it to collect and deliver bikes, provide pop-up doctor bikes and other projects he's working on. It can only be used on the road. It really is too big for the cycle lanes and for the green links. And he's averaging about 75 miles a month. He has had some problems with the battery range. We made the mistake of getting a single battery rather than the double battery, and it will only go 14 miles on the single battery. But we do think as a design issue, really, it should only be provided with a double battery given the size and the loads it's expected to take. We've given a bit of feedback on the design to Urban Arrows, and there's been a couple of maintenance issues, but despite this, Chris did have two vans. He did quickly get rid of one when he got the Tender 2500, and he also drastically reduced his fuel top-upping when on the existing van. But in March, he actually got rid of that one too, so he's completely diesel-free and doing everything by his Tender 2500. Thank you. Next slide, please. And finally, we have our newest champion. One of our champions unfortunately had to drop out due to the impact of COVID on their business. So we were looking around for a 10th champion. Lee came forward working in collaboration with our local environmental charity, wanting to set up Colchester's first e-cargo bike delivery service. So we were very keen and happy to support him. He just started out in February 2021, and he's using our Urban Arrow LG Performance. He's supporting local independent businesses and some community groups such as the Food Bank and the Tots to Teens. He's clocking up the miles, 400 miles last month. And what's been really useful is because he's travelling so many miles and getting to so many places in Colchester, he's really able to give us good feedback on the physical barriers to e-cargo bikes and infrastructure issues. So we're working in collaboration with the local cycling campaign and with Walk Colchester to collaboratively work on a map that's showing where the barriers are to bikes, e-cargo bikes and adapted bikes, so that we can take that map to Essex County Council, local landowners and Colchester Borough Council to see how we can address the barriers. And Lee's going to come on next and talk to you a little bit more about his experience setting up a bike delivery service. Next slide, please. And I'll leave you with a quote and a picture of Finn from our Colchester Bike Kitchen. He rides one of the bullets that we got. And thank you very much, and open to questions.
That was great. Thank you very much indeed, Emily. And my goodness, did you imagine that you would be doing all of this and saying what you are saying and having learned what you've learned as little as what a year ago last month? You had done none of this, I think it's fair to say.
No, we obviously the bid, we heard about the bid in May last year, and then we had to procure the bike. So it's only really since the summer, sort of July, we started getting the bikes. We didn't get all of them until December. So yeah, it's been a huge learning curve and very, very exciting project for us.
And I get this feeling from you that you really have enjoyed learning about all of this. Is that true, or has it just been a terrible slog in the midst of COVID?
It's been, I can't say it hasn't been a challenge with COVID and everything else on top of it, but it has been hugely exciting. And I'd never ridden a cargo bike myself before we had this project, and I just love them. I'm a complete convert, and the rest of the team who work on the project are really enjoying them. So it's a joy to be able to talk to businesses and encourage them to try them out. And our champions' passion and enthusiasm is brilliant as well. So I think what's really good is that we've got so many different types of organisations using the bike, so it gives real insight into different areas and different types of business and how they can make an e-cargo bike work for what they're doing.
So in fact, it's and created new relationships between the local authority and constituent businesses. It's quite interesting, isn't it? Now I have your first question from Mark Strong. Do the groups that use the bikes pay a hire fee, loan, or are they granted the ownership of the bikes? Also, who maintains them?
So the champions have got long-term loan of their bikes, and they are responsible for maintaining and insuring their bikes. With the pool bikes that we're offering on short-term loan, they are going to be free of charge. There's going to be a small fee to help cover the insurance, and we will maintain them.
Very good. Nigel Sharples wants to know, how did you decide on the different types of bike before selecting your champions?
We didn't. We've got our champions first, and then we selected the bike. So basically, each champion, we worked with them to look at what was available. We got advice from suppliers, and so they were all involved in selecting the bike that would suit them. I think the biggest challenge was that we had to select the bikes without being able to try them out, because there's nowhere local that supplies e-cargo bikes. So I'd say that was the only downside, that obviously we were basing our information on advice from suppliers, and yeah, so it would have been nicer to be able to try them out, but all in all I think everyone's happy with their bike, so it has worked out fine. And
you've done the right thing. I think we'll all agree that you've actually got a range of different models for this first fleet, so that people can actually try out the different e-cargo bike for the different role that it might play in their organisation or company. So you've got a nice wide range of try before you buy.
Yeah, now definitely. Then, we've got three wheelers and two wheelers, and obviously trailers as well. So yeah, we're pleased with the range.
Okay, so Amelia Hatfield, this has been set up in one urban area. Would Emily recommend for county councils trying to implement the use of e-cargo bikes that they start in one urban centre before trying to expand out? Well, just before you answer that and have a think about that one, because you are in a county council, what I would say, Amelia, is that clusters, think clusters. The visibility to the public of a set of cargo bikes is going to be greatly enhanced if they see several of them around in the one place at the one time. There's a great temptation, particularly in county councils looking at the whole of their shire county, to say, oh well, it's Buggin's turn to have a cargo bike, and you end up, you've got a choice of having 10 in one town or 1 in 10 towns, and I can assure you, you need to go for a cluster. But Emily may disagree with me, I don't know.
We're actually a borough council, so we are just Colchester based, so we didn't have to grapple with that tricky question.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No,
right.
No, we're borough council, but I think I'd agree, and I'd also say that it's a lot of work setting up, and maintenance and everything. So it's probably, if you're new to e-cargo bikes, I'd say focus on one area first and build up from there, and use what you've learned from that area to then extend it to other areas, because it is a huge learning exercise. And you want to keep it kind of small and contained and manageable before you get too ambitious, perhaps, unless you've got a really big team.
Okay, well, I'm going to bring that to a close now, because Emily has to scoot off to a meeting, and we thank you very much indeed for your clear presentation and for being cheerful about it too. Thank you.
I'm always cheerful about e-cargo bikes. Thank you, Richard. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah.
Bye.
Okay, well, I think that got us off to a roaring start. Now then, we need another word from another of our sponsors. Pleased to say that this seminar has been supported by Raleigh, the Nottingham-based company. Some of you will remember was once a very, very large manufacturer of bikes, but indeed is now reintroduced e-cargo bikes into its range, and it's supported the previous session in this series and will support the third one as well. I think that we need to give them at least one pat on the back, because they have not sought to plaster themselves all over this meeting and make us watch tedious sales pitches. In actual fact, they've got some good e-cargo bikes for the right kind of use, and you should go and look at them if that's what you're trying to do. So on with the show. Lee Pugh is the founder and chief pilot at Colchester's first e-cargo bike delivery service, and the floor, Lee, is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, Richard. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. So I'm picking up on where Emily left off, being one of the or the most recent e-cargo bike champion here in Colchester. Like everybody, I guess I'm brand new to e-cargo bikes. I'm actually, next slide please, a freelance events manager with a background in corporate live music, touring, festivals, that kind of thing. During the lockdown last year, I was able to redeploy myself as a teacher, homeschooling my kids. But as soon as the summer came, I was surplus to requirements, no longer needed. I was looking for something else to do. My kids were off doing their own things. I saw the local bike project, Route 51, who Emily mentioned, were looking for volunteers, and I threw myself into that. Next slide, please. There's that tender, that 2,500 tender. I was one of the first people to ride that big beast around Colchester, along with Chris, the guy who was the founder of that project. So I engaged with that bike, repair project, and that got me thinking about these things, these new things, e-cargo bikes. And at that time also, I was aware of a big change in people's attitudes towards cycling. That bike project, as Emily said, we were fixing up donated bikes, getting them back out to people in the NHS and other organisations, people in need of bikes. And I was aware that there was a change coming. We were experiencing it at the time. So changing attitude towards bikes, I'm getting involved in this e-cargo bike, thinking this is very, very interesting. Being mindful, what do I need to do next? What can I do next in terms of myself, my career development, moving forward? Next things for me, the next kind of thing for me to do career-wise or project-wise. Next slide, please. So this e-cargo bike activity that I was involved with got me researching and looking and thinking about, would something more work in Colchester? And that research led me to people like Pedal and Post, Pedal Me in London, Petty Cargo in Hereford, and big up and much respect to all of those guys. Pedal and Post particularly, who gave me some great advice moving forward, and Pedal Me, who have been involved in training me as well as other support. So I'm thinking about this this cargo bike that I've ridden. I'm aware of the cargo bike project, and I'm thinking, hang on, there could be something more for me to do here with the cargo bike in Colchester. Next slide, please. So I thought to myself, I want to give this a go. I want to push it a bit further. I want to see if there's an opportunity for me to develop a delivery service more than just the bikes that we were doing, based on what I'd seen and based on what I thought I could make happen. So I connected with my pals at Colchester Bike Kitchen, who are also part of Emily's project, and they very kindly, with some tweaks to their insurance, let me borrow their beautiful bullet, so I could start some trials. this was actually in January of this year. Terrible weather, but I was bitten by the idea of being involved and getting something on the go. I borrowed their bullet, and trials began. Next slide, please. So I enjoyed the trials. I pushed myself. I went out further with their bullet than I thought. I mean, I started off local. I went further. I started off with basic loads. I put more on. I rode in all weathers. I went out on my birthday, actually on the 14th of January, in sleet and rain, and I felt it could work. I felt excited by it, and I basically had got a bug. So with those trials, next slide, please. What I did initially was I used my contacts, local eco contacts here in Colchester, business contacts from previous incarnations of work and projects that I've been involved with, and I visited personally what I'd call the most likely shops and businesses locally, and asked them if they were up for trying this idea. And some of them were, some of them got behind it, some of them helped me promote, and that's how the kind of trials and that's how things started. Next slide, please. So as I said, I was aware of the Colchester Borough project, but I was bike project. I'd done my trials. I felt I needed my own bike, but I was aware of the need to be an established entity. One of the conditions of the Colchester Borough Council project, and I have some views on how they've gone about establishing their project, some pros and some cons that I'd be happy to talk about or take questions on in due course. But basically, for me to get hold of a bike myself, I needed to be an established entity, which in certain circumstances I wasn't. So I approached another excellent organisation in Colchester, Inform, our environmental charity, who had an established relationship, that's the word, with Colchester Borough Council, and they were right on board with it from the word go. And with them, next slide, please. With them, we were able to submit our application. We were able to basically negotiate with Emily and acquire a bike for to be the 10th champion. And what Colchester Borough Council wanted out of everything that they had with their e-cargo bikes is they did not have somebody exclusively running a delivery service. That is what I wanted to do. We were it was a great match, and with Inform I was able to develop a basic startup plan, which included, as well as the local businesses, looking at local community areas and community support groups who themselves might need or could benefit from some support. I was able to speak to local councillors, and despite the fact that I had this bike for free on this long-term loan, I was able to access some locality funding from local borough and county councillors, and that gave me a great start. That linked me into communities as well. Next slide, please. We also saw very quickly the potential of I'm nearly done. We also saw very quickly the potential of a crowdfunder. So we ran a crowdfunder with the Aviva Community Fund and raised this £2,500 from, as I say, 73 supporters, some of which were good friends and allies and colleagues of mine, some of which were new. I'd introduced them to the e-cargo bike idea, but that money then paid for insurance, security, planned maintenance, and other setup costs, and also helped raise our profile big time. That's about it really in terms of how I got things going. As I say, I'm happy to take questions and talk about other aspects of it. Other aspects for me include my own personal health and well-being, my fitness, and having a sense of purpose. I've got a very short video now, if there's time to show it, which was used as part of our crowdfunding activity. So if you're not getting the music, I'll just quickly chat over it. That's a mate of mine who came along with a drone and enabled me to produce this video. You see that 100 miles that's mentioned, that was in the first week, the very first week I did 100 miles. I think Emily mentioned that last month I'd done 400 miles. Well, this week, within the next couple of days, I'll hit 1,000 miles, which to me feels really, really fantastic. To some people, maybe it's not such a big deal, but for me, on this one bike, that's excluding the trials, to have hit 1,000 miles feels really, really good. And every week there are new businesses coming on board, and every week there are new community support groups and project ideas coming on board as well. So there's a bit of a reference there to the food bank activity. So this is the second video that we use to help boost our Aviva Community Fund activity. That again, we just produced ourselves and helped to do the trick. That's it really. If you wanted to click stop on the video now, it's got maybe another 25 seconds left, but if you wanted to stop, that's not a problem from my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you very much indeed. And it is intriguing that all over the country we've experienced what I would describe as community-based initiatives like yours. Cargo Dale in Calderdale, that's now got Beata Kubitz there has now got cargo bikes in 3 different towns in the valley. Chorlton bike deliveries in southwest Manchester, they're expanding rapidly. Even Ilkley in West Yorkshire, a very nice town, with some very steep hills, has got cargo bikes happening through Climate Action Ilkley. So these are going on all over now. I've got some questions for you. Amelia Hadfield wants to know how you decided who were the most likely businesses.
Well, I was kind of signposted from my connections with Enform, the environmental charity, who were able to point out to me that we had a number of eco-friendly refill shops, plastic-free shops, who are likely to have customers who would buy into the idea of having deliveries, wanting deliveries at home, but much preferring them to be eco-friendly deliveries, so not coming by diesel or petrol car and coming by bike. So that was the one aspect. And another aspect was basically, putting 2 and 2 together. Our bookshop, our local independent bookshop, sending books out by post, having an idea that, well, actually, to send those out is going to cost them £4, £5. I can come in with a better deal than that, and I can add value to their service. I can be quicker than the post office, and they can be seen to be improving their own eco credentials.
To sum it up, Lee, I think you're talking about some good old-fashioned graft and getting round. People want to know whether you're using any digital interface in terms of taking deliveries and managing them, and routing software and all that sort of thing. Are you?
Yeah, I am actually on a very basic level, still trialing and exploring. There are a number of free or low-cost apps out there. I'm using an app at the moment that costs $7.99 a month. That's my routing and delivery app.
You're allowed to advertise on something like this. What's it called?
It's called Route for Me.
All right, okay.
Route for Me. That's the app that I'm using.
I'm going to have to call that to an end now because we've got to move on to the next one. Thank you very much indeed, Lee.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
You'll have another chance to come in later at the end. Okay. Well, there we've had 2 completely contrasting presentations already, and now we're going to get one completely different again. Without further ado, Ross Phillips, the project officer at Cross River Partnership, responsible for spending some interesting government money. Ross.
Thanks very much, Richard, and yeah, really interesting to hear from Emily and Lee so far as well. Yeah, as mentioned, hi everyone, I'm Ross Phillips. I'm a project officer at Cross River Partnership, and I'll be talking about some of the partnership cargo bike schemes we've done in London so far. So next slide, please. So firstly, I'll just give a bit of a run through of Cross River Partnership. So CRP is a non-profit and impartial partnership organisation that's been delivering positive change for London's residents, businesses and visitors for over 25 years. So we do this by working with people, places and delivering projects across environmental health, air quality, sustainable transport, active travel, energy and lighting to make London more vibrant, greener, cleaner and safer as well. Next slide, please. So one of the projects is that we focused on heavily is Clean Air Villages 3. It's a 1-year Defra funded project led by the City of Westminster in collaboration with 12 London boroughs and 4 business improvement districts to improve the air quality in 16 different London villages, villages where air pollution and population density levels are high based on the air quality focus areas provided by the GLA. So this will build on the successes of the CAV 1 and 2 programme. We've delivered this one virtually in the past year. But what we do is we implement a solution in each village by engaging with businesses and communities to understand what solutions would work to improve air quality and support businesses and communities in these areas. So this is where many of our cargo bite schemes come from. Next slide, please. So just running a couple of different options. This is very basic, but if you're a business looking at your deliveries and collections, you might want to own a cargo bike. You might want to set one up yourself, even as simple as having a backpack and your own bike as well. You might want to use a dedicated courier service, or you might want to use a shared cargo bike scheme. I'm particularly going to focus on the last couple here as well. Next slide, please. So the first case study that we've got is from the CAV 2 programme, and it looks at how an initial trial can be used to support a business to make long-term sustainable behaviour change. So Paxton Cheese wanted to provide an eco-friendlier delivery option, but had a limited capacity or resource to deliver on demand. So they tried our cargo bike courier service trial. So the eco-friendly deliveries were really well received by clients. It was a really useful tool for their brand image. They cover London-wide and for larger events as well, so it's allowed them to continue operating exactly as they were before. And here the service was provided by EcoFleet. And then on the screen we've got some estimated emission savings throughout the year as well, with significant amounts of nitrogen oxides, carbon dioxide and particulate matter saved as well. Next slide, please. So the next example is from our CAV 2 project, where CRP and Instretton Business Improvement District worked together to initiate the idea and implement a shared cargo bike scheme, which has been made possible thanks to Transport for London funding. So firstly, business engagement was conducted with organisations in Streatham to understand what would work for businesses, and then improve knowledge and awareness of the cargo bikes whilst introducing riders training as well. So what worked was the outright purchase of the bike was seen as more financially sustainable. It stayed within Streatham bid, and funding was secured thanks to TfL and some brilliant stakeholder engagement as well. So it's free use for Instretton businesses, so it acted as a really good incentive for bid membership. They have a really good booking app and secure cargo bike storage, so it takes out a lot of those barriers for businesses. At a later date, it was also seen that the cargo bike wasn't fulfilling its full potential, so a shared rider was introduced, and that increased the usage to almost its max potential as well. Next slide, please. And this is just a very generic case study, but worth pointing out about how we've continued to implement new solutions in the past year with COVID-19. We've worked and partnered with local authorities, local businesses, and e-cargo bike courier providers such as EcoFleet and Zedify, who are on this as well, to support the delivery of cargo bike schemes across London. And we've had the challenge of completely virtual business engagement, but also realised the power of social media in reaching out to businesses as well. We've noticed particularly that businesses have pivoted more towards B2C, so they're delivering directly to customers, much more active on social media and trying new technology as well. And we've also worked with partners to provide support for vital community services too. So looking at pharmacies, charities and food banks, and making sure vulnerable people across London can get deliveries as well. So this kind of more community focused approach has helped partners a lot during the pandemic, during a very tough time. So next slide, please. So just identified a few learnings from what we found from running these projects. Firstly, opportunities. Businesses need an opportunity to try these new courier services for free and with a risk-free approach, and these really help towards long-term behaviour change. It's been really useful for vital COVID support, and businesses have been businesses have been decimated by the last year, and this can provide a really useful lifeline to trial new services such as B2C and try and get them to use new methods of delivering to customers as well that may not have been possible during lockdowns and various levels of restrictions. We are constantly learning, and we're constantly trying to improve the value of these schemes so they're more impactful and effective by learning what works and what doesn't work. We've noticed that also air quality conversations in London are becoming more common. Businesses appear to be becoming more environmentally aware and starting to understand the almost economic and financial impacts of pollution as well. And I put ultra low emission zone down as well. So the ultra low emission zone is expanding in London in October. This is a daily charge on kind of older polluting vehicles. And I guess it could be passed on to businesses from couriers. So getting people to think about these sorts of things when it does expand to a pretty vast area of London is going to be really, really useful. And I guess one of the other things is, so challenges wise, through the pandemic, we've engaged virtually through emails, phone and social media, but we've become much more comms heavy as well. Eat Out to Help Out was a really good time for hospitality businesses, but often a really bad time to speak to owners or managers about their operations because they're so, I guess, overwhelmed with a lot of the service that they were getting. Richard has really briefly spoken about this as well, but in some areas, a lack of visibility of cargo bikes means there's almost a limited understanding of what they look like or how they function. So in earlier CAV projects, we would normally go and provide a workshop in a local village where there would be a cargo bike to show local businesses what they look like. But during COVID, we've had to be much more descriptive, include images, get exact weights and sizes to what we're working with the providers we're working with. Nevertheless, there's always a massive surprise about how much cargo bikes can take for the businesses as well. And it's I guess finally long-term financial sustainability is that it's been a really tricky time for COVID. So with some of the users that we've had with some of the longer term users of the trials, we've tried to introduce things like subsidizing half the hours, so that there's almost able to be that sort of cost that they're able to realize the cost involved, but start to get them looking towards longer term use. We still allow and certainly encourage new businesses to use it for that risk-free and cost-free option as well. But let's say obviously that courier providers tend to have a lot of flexibility with their payment options per drop, prepaid hours, lots of different things as well. Next slide, please. And finally, we're delighted to have been awarded funding for CAV4 as well. This focuses on freight solutions for a clean air business recovery from COVID-19. Going to be ambitious and innovative by exploring new solutions such as using river, rail and walking freight, but particularly continuing to expand out cargo bike and EV solutions to vital new sectors, and taking it once again a flexible approach with COVID-19 as well. Next slide, please. But yeah, that's the end. Thank you all for listening, and I'll now hand back to Richard.
Thank you very much indeed, Ross. I particularly liked your challenge of underestimating what cargo bikes can do. We'll come on to that in the questions. Thank you very much indeed. Now we will move quickly on to our next contributor. You will have seen in the photos in Ross's presentation that a company called EcoFleet featured, and here we are going to hear from Slav Semenko, the operations team leader at EcoFleet. Unfortunately, he's got a camera problem, so we won't see his beautiful visage, but we will hear from him now. Thank you very much, Slav. It's all yours.
Hi, thank you very much, Richard. Yeah, sorry for the lack of webcam, but with the internet connection, sometimes a bit tricky, and I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me, even though you might not be able to. As Richard said, my name is Slav Semenko, and I am the operations team leader for EcoFleet Mindful Delivery. EcoFleet offers a zero-emission last-mile delivery service on cargo bikes in London, and we are based in Wandsworth, very close to Battersea Park. You've seen us on the presentation of Ross, and we'll discuss some examples from the Clean Air Villages 3 project, which was in connection with Cross River Partnership, and how these can be used to develop efficient, cost-effective, and sustainable delivery structures that benefit local businesses and organizations. Next slide, please. I'll be focusing on the CAV3 project in Tooting. This was actually the second year in a row that we have delivered in Tooting under the CAV initiative, Clean Air Villages. This year we served mainly 5 businesses with a total of 300 local deliveries and over 520 miles traveled. And the image you can see our rider Adrian during one of those deliveries, as we have to do now, wearing a mask. Next slide, please. For example, this project has been very beneficial for Patel Brothers, a local grocery store that has participated in both CAV projects in Tooting so far, reducing the amount of deliveries completed on their van, which was their main delivery option. But today I would like to talk about the case of 2 businesses from the Tooting market, a business called BYO and Love Art. And with their example, I will be suggesting a new approach in order to help us answering the following. Next slide, please. How can small local businesses provide their customers with a better, greener delivery while saving costs? Next slide, please. To better understand, we need to start with some background. So under the CAV initiative, for each business served, we would assign a time slot in which they would receive a dedicated bike and rider. So we would select, let's say, 2 hours on a Friday to give to a specific business, and they would receive a bike and rider that was only for them. And now, as we were setting up with BYO and Love Art, due to their low delivery volumes and proximity of the shops, the owner suggested that instead of allocating separate times to serve them, we would treat them as one single store in that regard. As you can see from the photos, they are literally glued together. And the photos are separate ones, but you can see that Love Art and BYO are one next to the other. Next slide, please. So what needed to be done by BYO and Love Art to achieve this? First, they needed to coordinate the delivery offering to customers so that these deliveries happen on same days. These are small businesses with a low volume of deliveries, which up to then would be completed completely by them in-house without relying on a service provider. It was already beneficial that these deliveries happen on the same day. Now, what we needed was that these days matched. So obviously, if these businesses, BYO or Love Art, were doing their deliveries, whether it's by car, bike, cargo bike, if they had 10 deliveries a week and they could do all of those deliveries on a Monday, that's obviously much better than having 2 deliveries a day or whatnot. So the second point would be that BYO and Love Art had to coordinate collection times. If these deliveries were offered on the same day to their customers, but we could only collect from one in the morning and the other in the evening, there would be no significant benefit. And although these deliveries were free for the businesses, they were still supported by the Cross River Partnership and local council. With this joint effort, it meant that we would spend less resources on serving BYO and Love Art compared to serving them separately. This meant saving in total cost of delivery and more usage out of the resources granted by CRP. Obviously, as this is an initiative to support the communities and as many businesses as possible, if we can do the same and spending less resources with each business, that's great. That's exactly what we want. In particular, the most obvious and quite significant reduction would be in commuting charges or the initial cost of a delivery. For example, one business booking 10 deliveries with a single collection has the same initial cost to booking 1 delivery with 1 collection, but the costs per drop are very different. Next slide, please. Now, how can this be implemented by the courier company, and how can this be applied by the business? In this case, this was obvious, and not to consolidate these deliveries would have been a mistake. What's important to realize, though, is that this is possible even if the businesses are not literally sharing walls. But this is not something that has to be done only by the logistics manager once all the deliveries are scheduled, but should become rooted in the practices of the business and the service provider. So now on this slide, the way that we can approach this is with the courier company, as for example, EcoFleet. We can apply this to our research or our sales strategies or both, and approaching business in the same area and creating the connections. And this connection part is crucial. This kind of relationship that BYO and Lovart had can only be done effectively and sustainably if all parties involved work together in order to create these synergies from the point of offer of delivery to the end customer. So as I mentioned, BYO and Lovart had to make those deliveries available to their customers on specific days that matched. This cannot be done if there's no direct communication and direct connection between both parties. Next slide, please. Clearly, to mention on the business side, it's possible to shape the delivery structure in unison, achieving higher efficiency and drastically reducing cost, which is exactly what BYO and Lovart did. Now, clearly, the end result is what already happens with any major delivery provider. So if we think of DPD, TNT, any of the bigger players in the delivery, not exclusively the zero emission delivery, but what happens is they pick up as many parcels as possible in one single area and deliver them all at the same time. But this doesn't mean that we have to follow that structure. We just have to find a way of how to make that structure work for the cargo bike or whatever other zero emission initiative we have. What changes is that by working together, several businesses with a low volume can get the benefits of a business with high volumes without taking on as much risk and gaining flexibility to grow. Most importantly, all of this without sacrificing the quality of the deliveries or increasing the negative impact on the environment and their community. And this is obviously the most important part. What we're trying to achieve using cargo bikes is we want to first raise the quality of the deliveries. Everyone has nightmare stories of their laptop has been kicked through their door and it's sitting somewhere and then somehow a neighbor steals it. And at the same time, we want to reduce the pollution. We want to reduce the traffic in our cities and hopefully improve our communities and the environment. And final slide, please. And thank you very much for listening, and a nice photo of our bike.
And thank you, Slav. Thank you very much indeed. Very thoughtful indeed. We'll come back to you with some questions in a moment. And just to remind everybody in the audience, we are storing up a load of questions, which will go into our panel session immediately after the next two speakers. So do keep the questions coming. Now then, without further ado, we will go to a two-hander from Rob King and Grace Regan. Rob King will probably be quite well known to some of you already, but has been around in the world of e-cargo bikes for longer than he dare think. And Grace is going to come in alongside or after, I don't quite know how you're going to play this, you two, and talk about being a customer of Zedify. Because one of the things we wanted to draw out from today's session, and I'm pleased that Ross covered it particularly well as well, is that There is a choice to be made when you're thinking e-cargo bike. It's not all about buying your own bike. It's about making good use of all the resources available, and one of them is to have a third-party logistics company do the work for you. So without further ado, Rob, we're not on video yet for you. If you could switch your video on, that would be good. And Grace, likewise, if you're coming in at the same time. And there we go. Hello, Rob.
Morning, Richard. Morning, everyone. Thanks very much for that introduction. That's very kind. So I'm Rob. I'm the CEO of Zedify, and I guess I wanted to start with that idea of deliveries in cities and remind us all, or think about how we see deliveries in cities and the sort of problems there. And I don't know if anyone here has been a delivery driver in a city, but I think we can all agree that it's a complete nightmare trying to get around a city. And Zedify is all about trying to do deliveries better for our customers in terms of doing the deliveries in the way they want, but also better for our cities in terms of helping to reduce emissions, reduce congestion, and essentially make our cities more livable. And that's essentially what drives me and all of our team at Zedify. Next slide, please. So I wanted to think about, I guess, the problem, and I think for most of us it's probably pretty obvious what that is, but a bit of a reminder of what those sort of problems are. And I think fundamentally we've got a changing urban landscape. We've got increasing congestion that's really, really rampant and is growing a lot. We're getting more and more delivery vans zooming around our cities, and that's not just on the street in terms of congestion, but also on the roadside, on the curbside in terms of parking. And in terms of how that can manifest itself, it can often lead to a really poor delivery experience. You get frustrated drivers and missed time slots, that kind of thing. And the cost economy, I think, suggests just how bad that increasing congestion is. So that is a real problem that we need to address. And then the second thing is something very topical at the moment, which is obviously pollution and looking at things like the Ella case. And therefore, consumers and the public in general are demanding cleaner streets for all, less congestion, less pollution. And in terms of the delivery experience and for delivery companies, that's becoming a bigger problem because City Council are responding and going, well, we're going to close off and restrict access in our city centres. And finally, I think it's worth mentioning that we do have in logistics a pretty old system that I think is essentially broken, is not working for most people, including the people in it in terms of on the gig economy. But the old system is based on having delivery hubs many, many miles outside of a city. And for those big trucks that may be really fantastically optimized for driving up and down the motorway, not really very well optimized for a city centre environment. So you get these big trucks arriving into a city and really struggling to deliver in that environment because it is so different and it is changing all the time. And in terms of that problem, it's a cost problem for the delivery companies, and it's a problem for consumers in terms of the flexibility of those deliveries arriving and how they arrive. They arrive on a big truck often, or a big delivery van, which is not how they want them to be delivered. And also they can't be very flexible in a city. If they come from a delivery hub many miles outside that city, they can't be very flexible. Next slide, please. So our solution is all about enhancing our clients' brands with deliveries that delight their customers and being really focused on the customer experience. We do that by doing those hyperlocal deliveries. That means we can be much more flexible, offer chosen delivery windows for our customers. We have living wage employed riders, and that means that the doorstep experience is often much better. They tend to be happier. As I said right at the start, doing deliveries in cities is a stressful experience, and if you're stuck in a van and getting caught up in congestion, it can be, that frustration can let itself out quite badly on the customer. But on a cargo bike, you can let a lot of that frustration out in exercise, which tends to make you happier and more well disposed to giving a better customer experience. And obviously, like all cargo bikes and all cargo bike businesses, what we're doing is offering zero emission deliveries, and that impact on the environment is obviously good for our clients, and also better for the city in terms of reducing emissions and reducing congestion in terms of those vehicles being much lower impact, taking up less space, and being more efficient. Next slide, please. So yes, we've created a delivery service which we think is smarter, more ethical and more responsive. As I said, we employ our riders. That's pretty unusual in the industry, and trying to champion living wage, just as many others like EcoFleet and Slab was saying earlier. And then we like to do things smarter, in our model for consolidating deliveries makes those deliveries much more cost effective as well. So not just doing point-to-point deliveries as most logistics companies do, but thinking about how we can optimize the delivery experience so it's less vehicles on the road, but also for the consumers, more cost effective at the same time. Next slide, please. So our model is based on micro hubs and consolidating there on the edge of urban areas. They act as a sort of gateway, I guess, for deliveries coming into and out of the city, so that we can, when we're in the city environment, we can use cargo bikes, and we can make sure that we are acting as that kind of gateway and that transition from deliveries coming on those big cargo trucks from maybe delivery hubs miles away, or from regional customers that are based outside of the city, and an opportunity for them to remode and have those deliveries consolidated. And that means that by being really close to where you're doing your deliveries, you can be much more flexible. So our delivery cargo bikes tend to go backwards and forwards from our hubs maybe 3 or 4 times in a day. And that means that they're delivering most of the time pretty full. They're doing collections and deliveries all at the same time. And it means that one of our larger cargo trikes can deliver actually more volume than a typical small van. And then when they get into the hub, obviously in the city environment, we are remoding to cargo bikes. Mostly we use larger ones. And of course, cargo bikes, we're all here, I think we'd all agree, are wonderfully efficient in that urban environment. They're zero emission, they're low impact, and they're very, very quick, very good, not needing to use car parking spaces and take up space. So really fantastic vehicles for the urban environment. And finally, we tie all that together with smart technology that makes that whole system work seamlessly. Next slide, please. This is just to give an example of a typical micro hub. This is one from Cambridge, where deliveries will come in throughout the day. They'll be consolidated, as I said earlier, put onto routes, and then put onto specialist cargo bikes. Mostly we use larger ones like these trikes. We've got some four-wheelers as well. And that's because we like to consolidate stuff, not because we like to take massive stuff. So we don't tend to move greenhouses or massive pallets, but because we like to move lots of small items together and bundle those into consolidated routes rather than just doing point-to-point sort of deliveries. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, and this is just another example. Some newer, larger cargo bikes coming out at the moment. These ones are made in Oxford and can take 2 cubic meters of space. You think of a small van, I think is around 3.5 cubic meters of space. So they're pretty big, but they're still very narrow. They can utilize cycle infrastructure, and they can use some routes through town. It's not perfect for all routes, and there's a lot of training required of these riders in terms of where is appropriate and where is inappropriate. As you can imagine, going around the back of a bus stop on a shared use cycle pavement isn't appropriate use of a vehicle like this, because they're still pretty big. Next slide, please. So in terms of our services, we work with any business that has scheduled deliveries in urban areas, and that's a big key thing for us. We don't do on-demand deliveries. So part of the reason for that is that we employ our riders, so we don't have a whole bunch of people just hanging around on an app waiting for deliveries to come in. That doesn't really work for our model. So we need to know when those deliveries are happening. They can be pretty quick. So, you know, we can have a cutoff at lunchtime, for example, and still get them out that afternoon. But the point is that there is a cutoff, and there is some scheduling that happens. There is some time around that. We do what we call only mile local deliveries. So that's deliveries that happen within that urban environment, within that city. So pick up from a local business and deliver locally. Typically we'll work with small businesses, retailers, libraries, medical, council, these sort of stuff. We do last mile final delivery for larger 3PLs like FedEx, and also for regional businesses. So if you've got a veg box supplier, for example, coming in from 10 miles outside the city, they can use our hubs to drop off items, and then we can deliver into the city for them through consolidation. And we also offer a service for local shops. So if they have deliveries that are going outside the city, so in Cambridge, perhaps they've got a delivery needing to go to Scotland, we can do those collections. And we have an integration with some of the 3PL partners like DHL. So we can do the collection, bring it back to our hubs, consolidate it, and then DHL will go and pick that up. And that means we can offer our retailers a one-stop shop for all their deliveries, not just their local ones, but also means that we can do that first mile bit zero emission and make sure that's not impactful on the city. And next slide, please. And these are some of our wonderful customers. As I said, we work with lots of small businesses like the wonderful Spicebox. You're about to hear from Grace in a sec to tell her about her experience. But we also work with some of the larger businesses like FedEx and 3PLs. We work with some local authorities. And Valpak's an interesting one in terms of collections as well. So we don't just do last mile, but also first mile stuff. And Valpak do household recycling of batteries. They used to send a massive truck into a city to pick up maybe five items from, for example, supermarkets on a weekly basis, and then go to the next city. So they'd be driving around the entire city on a massive truck to pick up 5 relatively small items. Whereas now they have a massive battery bank at our hubs. We go and do those collections, and then once every 2 or 3 months, when that battery bank is full, they'll come and do that collection. So we can massively reduce the number of big trucks and the operational efficiency in cities in that way. Next slide, please. So we're growing, and we've got 10 depots currently in 9 UK cities, and we've got some really exciting expansion plans over the next couple of years to grow this network of last mile and first mile delivery companies using cargo bikes. Next slide, please. And nearly finally, impact as well. We've all talked a bit about impact, and I think we all know this, but cargo bikes obviously do have a big impact on emission savings. I think the interesting point I want to make here is on CO2 emissions. A cargo bike, from our estimates, are at least 90% lower than even an electric vehicle, electric van. So when people say, oh, it's okay, we've got an electric van, they are still emitting quite a lot of emissions, and not just things like carbon and NOx, but also from tires. And looking at the whole life cycle, I suppose, of that vehicle and what's had to go into it, you know, you're transporting this huge weight around, so you have to have much bigger batteries, and everything just scales up in that way. So if you can put these things on cargo bikes, it's going to be far better in terms of impact. Next slide, please. And then finally, it was really just thinking about, obviously I've given a talk, as well as some of the others like Slav from EcoFleet, about, you know, being a service provider for businesses. And obviously the option is there very much for independent businesses to run their own schemes and use their own cargo bikes. And we're certainly not here in the business of trying to persuade people not to do that, or businesses not to do that, but really just to maybe just a bit of awareness on things to consider before I hand over to Grace to talk about her experience as a customer. But in terms of vehicles, might want to consider things like reliability and finance and support and maintenance, insurance and stuff like that. So if you're a small business, you know, those could be some barriers there. In terms of storage space, some of these vehicles can be quite big, so thinking about where they could get stored, thinking about staffing and training. We found that cargo bikes actually do need a fair bit of training and support of those riders to make sure they're fit, but also thinking about you know, how easily you can find staff and what happens when they go away on holiday and sickness and stuff like that. And thinking about flexibility as well. You know, can you call on people last minute and get them to do what you want for them? And then finally, on efficiency, I think one of the key messages I want to bring about in terms of our business was about that idea of consolidation and doing collection rounds, which is what we do for local retailers, where we go and do collection rounds, bring it back to our hubs where the items are consolidated, and then they go out on delivery rounds, and that makes the whole process much more efficient, especially if you've got very low numbers of deliveries. So I think you've definitely heard enough from me. I wanted to pass over, please, to Grace from Spicebox. So Grace, over to you, please.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me on. So sorry, no slides today. This is quite a last minute thing. But I thought I'd just give you an introduction to who we are and our journey to working with Zedify. So we're called Spicebox. We're a plant-based curry house in Walthamstow. and we opened in Jan 2019. And being a curry house, delivery and takeaway as always, well, takeaway has always been quite a large part of our business. We didn't actually used to do any delivery, and that was mainly because we didn't really have the need to do it because we were doing such great dine-in and takeaway sales, and also because I was always quite reluctant to work with a third-party delivery provider in the kind of on-demand hot food space. So we're talking Uber Eats and Deliveroo mainly. And B, I knew the kind of operational way of setting up your own in-house delivery service as a restaurant. So we parked it for a bit, and trade was going really well. And then obviously the pandemic hit. We knew that we were going to have to start delivering very quickly. And just for the kind of ease of getting that off the ground, we started by working with Uber Eats, who gave us a fantastic introductory commission structure. And you know, we stayed open throughout the pandemic. A lot of local businesses in Walthamstow closed, which meant that we saw incredible volumes and demand from the get-go, especially with delivery. Delivery suddenly became our primary revenue source, kind of overnight with the onset of COVID. And that was all fine, but we knew that when that commission was going to go back up to what the kind of standard third-party commission is, we're talking about 25 to 30%, and also when the VAT would increase, it was going to be really tight in terms of us making any sort of money from delivering through these third parties. On top of that, you know, we were giving away a massive kind of brand piece to this other company that we had no control over, which was essentially our customers' experience of getting their spice box meal at the door. Didn't have any control really over the marketing, and obviously the drivers worked for Deliveroo and Uber Eats, not us. So we started to speak about bringing delivery in-house and how we could do that. We knew the marketing side of things wouldn't be an issue because we had such a strong, loyal following in Walthamstow, but it was mainly the kind of operational logistics of how we get the food to our customers on demand, hot and quickly. On top of that, we're a business where, you know, sustainability runs through the core of everything we do. Everything we sell is vegan. Our curry house is powered by renewable energy. So looking to do zero emissions delivery was definitely kind of top of our priority list. And we knew that Zedify had been working with Waltham Forest Council with their Zed courier bikes. And so we thought, when we knew we had the volume, we thought, okay, we should probably reach out and see if there's something we can do. Obviously, having listened to Rob, you'll know that hot food on-demand delivery is not something that they specialize in. So initially, you know, we had to have a few conversations. We thought, okay, we'll give it a go. So how it works is that we have dedicated Zed drivers on shift specifically for Spice Box every evening, and that ranges from one driver kind of early weekdays, quiet nights, up to 3-4 drivers on a weekend when it's really busy. They all get paid a set wage an hour. At first glance, it's an incredibly high cost, but as soon as you start adding in economies of scale to that, and us putting out, you know, 3 to 5 deliveries per rider, the economics actually work out a lot better than paying that commission to the likes of Deliveroo or Uber Eats. And you know, on top of that, we can deliver our reusable takeaway tiffins, which are a massive part of the brand. We can, you know, deliver them, collect them, and keep them in circulation. It's zero emissions. We've got control over, you know, how the brand is, the customer journey essentially. So ordering through our website, and that delivering through Zedify's amazing riders. Rob was right, they're incredibly happy. You know, they're really great at their job. We're really happy to have them representing our brand. And so, yeah, so far it's been going really well. And now we're actually looking, you know, our plan is to scale and open more sites. And we're now having conversations with Zedify about, you know, scaling with them in some sort of delivery partnership. So we're now thinking, okay, where does Zedify operate and where can we open a site? Because we know we've got that in-house delivery piece sorted through them. So yeah, as a hospitality restaurant brand, I would say I really recommend it. One thing I would definitely add to that though is kind of volume is key. It would not work unless we were doing really high volumes, which fortunately we have been doing so far.
Grace, what timing? I was about to interrupt you, but you've done great there. And I don't know how much this audience is aware of quite what commissions the likes of Deliveroo take. But in a certain scurrilous magazine called Private Eye last week, they had an example of the commission being 47% of the gross take. Anyway, on that desultory note, we will move rapidly on to more entertaining stuff, and we'll start the panel session. And we've actually got a string of questions. Goodness knows whether we'll get through them all before the gong goes. But let's start with a really tough one. I'm going to ask Rob King to lead on this, but if any of the other contributors want to say something, just flag it up to me. Tom Cotton asks, what are the economics of cargo bikes? Each bike carries 100 to 200 kilos with a limited range. To carry the same cargo as a van requires 6 drivers at 6 times the cost of one van. This does not appear to be economically viable. Please explain.
Well, that's a great question. Well, I guess fundamentally the most important thing is efficiency, I guess, and how quickly you can do those deliveries, because your biggest cost is your staff cost in all of that. And if that staff is going to be sat in traffic jams or looking for car parking spaces while the cargo bike zooms past and pops their cargo bike up immediately outside the business door, if that bit can be faster, and that's why I think the dynamics of a city massively make a difference about whether this can work and whether this can't. And the dynamics in most urban environments is changing. As I said, you know, it's local authorities are trying to reduce pollution, reduce larger vehicles wherever they can. So if that is pushing the efficiency kind of level in favor of cargo bikes, then that is essentially what's happening. So I think that's the core of it. Now, I also think the profile is really important of that vehicle. So if you are delivering one 200 kilo item across town 10 miles, I'm almost certain that that would be much more efficient in a van. If you're doing 20 deliveries in 1 hour, you're going to have to stop and start the whole time. That advantage of getting right up to the door front and not getting cut up in the congestion, that's where the real advantage kicks in, I think, and doing those sort of stop-starty sort of stuff. And that's where it can be a lot less efficient in a van. But I would say, you know, I don't think cargo bikes are the solution, but they are definitely part of the solution in cities. And it's about essentially what we've been trying to do is trying to say, well, let's not make a problem of, hey, this van has to travel, oh, this journey has to go 50 miles from this hub into the city centre, and therefore it's going to have a vehicle that's really well optimised for going up and down the M1, but really not well optimised for working in a city. How can we just, you know, make sure those two are separated out? And that's where the micro hub model comes in, that you can then do that transfer over. So yeah, I think the right profile and the efficiency are the big things that make cargo bikes work and cycle logistics work.
So Tom, I'd also add to that, no PCNs, no penalty charge notices, parking tickets. Also very recently, in the last couple of years, one of the companies well known to us, G-Newt, did a check, properly sound academic study actually, on what actually happened to their vans and van drivers in the centre of London. And I can't remember the percentage, but it was something like, from memory, something like 70% of the time, the driver was actually on foot. And the van wasn't doing an awful lot other than get parked in very awkward spaces. And so much so that some logistics companies are now looking at runners and walkers, as well as looking at cargo bikes. So I think it's about horse for the course. As to range, well, yeah, if you're trying to go from London to John O'Groats, you know, you've got a range problem on a cargo bike. But what we find is that in last mile and first mile delivery and collection, the actual distance you need to cover isn't very far. And on a standard e-cargo bike, many of our routes that the companies I'm involved with, we don't need to charge the battery more than once every 2 days. Now, obviously, if you're doing 7 in the morning till 11 at night shifts, well, it's quite straightforward. You're going to have to get a second battery, or even a third if you're really doing some distance. And finally, quite a lot of e-cargo bikes now have slots for a second battery on board. And although that's a bit of additional weight, it does actually improve your range enormously. And that's especially useful for those of you who've been asking questions about hilly areas. Certainly you might need a bit more power there. Right, well, I think that we'll move on. Lots and lots of questions. Let's pick on something a bit more soft. Several people have been asking questions. Melissa Vento, for instance, what about business engagement? Many of the speakers have talked about engaging with businesses, but how have they gone about it? What works? It seems to be the thrust of these questions. Now, I'm going to just go to you, Grace, first, actually, and ask you, you've been on the receiving end of people who are trying to sell you delivery services. What's your experience of that? Did they click with you? Did they understand you? And, you know, you've explained that you ended up with Zedify, but did they even approach you?
I would say Zed/Zedify were probably the only delivery company that didn't approach us on the onset of the pandemic. I mean, obviously it's because we're just not a core use case for them, and I appreciate that. Yeah, obviously the kind of classic third-party food delivery providers were all kind of gagging to get our trays, and they'd use various, you know, like the Uber Eats introductory offer I mentioned, you know, it would mainly be around commission rates that they try and lure you in with. We knew about Zed purely because we saw their cargo bikes driving around Waltham Forest, and they've got, you know, this partner, Zed is Zedify's partnership with Waltham Forest. They've got that partnership with the council, and they're kind of everywhere. You can't miss them. And we knew local businesses that, you know, like bakeries that use them to deliver bread. So it's more about, yeah, I mean, I would say in terms of if you're trying to win new business as a e-cargo bike provider, it's really about understanding like the individual needs of that business and like where you can help them specifically, as opposed to like a blanket approach.
Okay, thank you. Ross, you have clearly, through your various projects, made links with businesses. What are your 3 best things for doing something like that in terms of business engagement?
Yeah, it's a tough one to almost like put down to specific factors, I'd say. I think I'd say the first thing is we're trying to support these businesses in just you know, effectively a government funded project. I think, you know, we're trying to give them an opportunity to trial something for free. So I don't necessarily have the experience of perhaps what Rob or you know, some of Slav's colleagues may have with this, but I think we've found, you know, comms has been really successful over the past year, like social media heavy approach, and allow people to get in touch with us as well. I know there was a lot of direct face-to-face business engagement going around and talking to these businesses and trying to understand what works for them, not necessarily with the idea of we're going to put a cargo bike in the area, but just trying to understand, you know, what are the problems with your deliveries and operations, and how can, you know, various different zero or low emission options help you, from, you know, consolidating with some of your neighbours to on just anything to effectively like cargo bike stuff as well. Charities and communities will probably be one of the big things as well. I sense you might be about to cut me off, but they're very altruistic as obviously as a sector. And I think we found that, like, working with community groups and charities, they've always been very keen to put us in touch with others. So that's why a lot of the kind of community projects that we've been doing in the past year have been very successful. But perhaps Slav can add to it as well.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, Slav, you wanted to come in.
Hi, I just want to, with this, I think also to answer a bit the question of that was for Rob before. I think it has all to do about looking at cargo bikes not as just a substitute for the current method of deliveries. Even comparing to something like Deliveroo, what needs to happen is, because cargo bikes in nature are mainly coming from companies that spend a lot on operations, and are very operations focused, like Rob was mentioning, the consolidation is the key to making cargo bikes work. Because if we're just doing one pickup, one drop off, that's what we do on a bike. And even though that might work for someone like Deliveroo, but as we know, that has social and economical costs on what it happens. And so the way for us to attack this as courier companies and as businesses that want to use a new solution that is either more socially responsible or environmentally responsible is to make sure we all work together to create a solution, not just simply, okay, I have this delivery on Deliveroo every day from 9.
So I think it's fair to say what you have given a very convincing comment on is the whole idea of collaboration rather than competition. And I think that you've made the case extremely well. What I would add to this is that in my experience, business improvement districts, Ross referred to BIDs, certainly, I don't know if anybody else did. Business improvement districts are a great way into local businesses, especially smaller ones on the high street. For those of you not familiar with a bid requires that all the businesses in the chosen geographical area contribute financially through the rate preset to the bid. And therefore, once they've paid their money, boy, do they want good value out of it. So actually, the businesses involved in a bid tend to be really highly motivated to get something out of being in that bid. And therefore, marketing through a bid is a really great idea if you've got one in your area. Okay, now we're going to move on to something else. We have got a very specific question from Aidan Chisholm. Cargo bike specific loading bays. Has anybody got any experience of these? If you haven't, we'll just go on to the next one. It's certainly one that I've never seen. Certainly it's true that traditional van and truck loading bays will be the wrong height. It's also true that a lot of people are experimenting with containerization in cargo bikes, where you have a roll-on, roll-off box on the back of the cargo bike. And therefore, to do that effectively, you need a right level to roll it on and off from. But I don't know, Rob, have you done anything on cargo bike specific loading bays?
Only that we've been excluded from many, particularly big businesses, loading bays. Selfridges won't let us in, for example, in London. Apparently, we're dangerous. I've nothing more to add.
We've asked a very good question, but we don't know the answer. What I would say is the rumor has it, and it is only a rumor, and I'm speaking to Amazon on later this week, so hopefully I'll get the facts. But I understand that Amazon are going to trial a European system called RYTLE, R-Y-T-L-E, which does involve a much larger cargo bike with a demountable containerized approach. And that's going to be very, very interesting to see how that works. It's going to be at London Wall in the City of London Corporation boundary in a car park there. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that works. Now, moving rapidly on, I've got a question from Mark Strong. I'm going to read it out. because this is a great one, Mark. Well done. From a licensing application in Brighton, Wheezy would rely on staff at both sites using electric bikes and mopeds owned by the company. A Brighton and Hove City Council licence panel was told today that the police said Sussex police have concerns over the increased number of two-wheeled delivery vehicles on the road. That's, well, there's a whole load of issues buried in there. For those of you not familiar, Wheezy is a UK startup. It began in the COVID era in May last year with serious venture capital backing. They're aiming to get 600 e-bikes out on the road by the end of this year, doing deliveries of groceries from dark stores. That's their model. And in fact, they're due to come to my city, Manchester. So here they are applying presumably for a license in some way. I don't quite know why they're asking for a license, but anyway, they must have had to do so. And they're getting a little bit of a knockback from the police there. Lee, have you ever had any queries from police in Colchester about who the heck you are and whether you're illegal?
No, not specifically about legal status. Polite and pleasant and friendly inquiries from PCSOs, Essex Police PCSOs, as we do a lot of community-based work and support, but nothing nothing untoward, nothing other than that.
Okay, Slav, what about EcoFleet? Have you ever had your riders stopped? What the heck are you doing here?
I would say in London, there's a very, we actually had a big discussion about this, about the royal parks. Rob maybe is aware of this. For example, Hyde Park and Kensington Park are separated by a carriageway. And if you try to look at what is forbidden and what's allowed there's not really any mention of cargo bikes, but there is mention of business vehicles. So the problem is cargo bike part of that? Because some riders would go through the carriageway and the police would say it's okay, and other riders would go through the same carriageway and a different police officer would say it's not okay because business use is not allowed. But I think this is just a matter of the businesses are growing out of reach of government regulation, and that's something that has to be changed. I know that a few years ago there was a petition or something to have this reviewed, but I don't think anything happened. But I think cargo bikes don't really have a firm status for now, and I think that that's going to be an issue going forward. And if we get more and more cycle-only ways that might be closed for businesses, that might become an issue, and cargo bikes need those ways.
Okay, thank you. Well, Mark, you've asked a very good question there, because behind that there is a whole load of issues to do with standardization of the product, for instance. And those of you who are interested in this, there is now a European standards committee looking at a industry standard for the build and design of cargo bikes. It's called the CEN, and it's Working Group 9 of the Technical Committee on Cycling, Technical Committee 333. And I'm pleased to say that European Cyclogistics Federation is very, very involved in how that is evolving. Now then, I need some guidance from Juliana and Mark. Are we going to extend the question session? We've still got 100 people on the call, and we have some great questions still left to answer. If we go for another 10 minutes, will that do, everybody? Come on out. Yes, right. I've been told to go for it. Right. So moving rapidly on, somebody wants to know, would Zedify be interested in franchising? They want you to come to their town, Rob.
Brilliant. That's what we do. If we can help at all, that'd be amazing.
And does EcoFleet want to grow particularly?
Oh yeah, of course. I think this is a business that can only work with numbers, because everyone wants a £2 delivery, but £2 delivery doesn't pay for the rider and definitely doesn't pay for the bikes and everything else involved. So yeah, growing is the only way to go.
I think the answer to the person there is that there are lots of avenues to explore, and certainly at the moment the members of the UK Cyclogistics Federation are very collaborative in their approach across the UK, very, very supportive of each other's development. And you already heard from Lee that he'd had help setting up from some of UK CLF's members like Pedal Me and Pedal and Post and so on. So I think the way in there is to go and talk with each other. Now, next item. Winston Gordon from London Bike Hub has asked about training for cargo bike riders. Now, Chris Dixon at Pedal Me, I don't know if Chris is on the call, is very keen on training and is very happy to talk to anybody. But what do you do, Slav? What do you do, Rob? Let's start with you. Slav, what do you do with your riders?
So for us, not only for safety, but also for insurance, all of our riders have level 3 bikeability, which is given by an external training provider, and the riders can only start delivering or even start training our business ways after they pass that training. So basically all the riders, that's the first thing they do. They go out and have a trainer that's usually 1-2 days, and once they pass that, once they're certified, they can go out on the road, and never before that. Even I did the training as well. Even to go out to the place where we train, the riders have to take the cargo bike in their hands, so that we obviously keep everyone safe, riders and public included.
Very good. Rob?
Yes, something similar. We do a prerequisite bikeability level 3 as a sort of starting point, and then we have an outcome-based full training program, training and assessment program. Actually, both combines all sorts of stuff, internal and external, parking a cargo bike, where you ride it, all of that. And online, we do an online test as well, just to check understanding about, like I think I mentioned in my talk, around where's appropriate, where's inappropriate to ride a cargo bike, and making sure they get that, where to park and not park them, and interactions with the public, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, all of that. Lee, I think, wanted to come in as well on that, actually.
Thank you. Just a quick diversion, because Grace has got to leave us. Grace, I've been asked, do you deliver alcohol? I don't know why they would. Do you? No, you're on mute. You're on mute.
We do with our food, yeah. So you can order a beer with your takeaway.
Okay. Now, I think that was a very quick question. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Bye now.
Thanks, Grace.
Right. That was got that question in. So we're getting some questions about. Oh, wait a minute. No, let's just finish on training. Lee, have you had to train anybody yet besides yourself?
I haven't had to train anyone specifically yet, but part of my model for the e-cargo bike activity that I'm undertaking in Colchester is that I will undertake additional training myself to enable me to help others in the borough engage with the council's own project, and individuals as well who gather themselves or get themselves e-cargo bikes. I'll be the person to go to for that kind of training. And then just finally, I have undertaken just recently Pedal Me City and Guild Assured training as well, and I found that as a professional rider very, very useful. Excellent indeed.
Excellent. And what I would say is that within the UK Cyclogistics Federation, there is an ongoing discussion about creating some kind of nationally accepted rider training accredited course. These things take time and energy and effort to create. And as we're a new industry, I'm not going to apologize for the fact it doesn't exist already. However, I would say that I will be apologizing if we don't have it in place over the next 2 or 3 years. I certainly think we need to do it. Now then, somebody's asked, Will Ainsley has asked, what about funding sources for cargo bike startups and cargo bikes themselves? Will, I think just to summarize, we've heard that Zedify is starting up in Bristol with £100,000 assistance for a future transport zone in Bristol from the Department for Transport via the combined authority there. We know that Emily Harrop and Lee particularly benefited from the government's e-cargo bike grant fund last year. That put out £2 million. And the rumor is that that's going to get an extension. And it's been slowed down by the May elections, and we'll get an announcement on that next month. You've heard from Ross that Defra have been funding some cargo activity through their Clean Air Villages program. Business improvement districts and town councils are, in my experience, very interested in these kind of initiatives. Finally, if you were coming to my bike shop, Manchester Bike Hire, that's just a small plug, people, just a small plug. If you were coming to my shop to buy a cargo bike, we now have a fully commercial third-party finance offer for commercial companies, which is at remarkably low interest rates from a finance company that is actually interested in green as well. So there's a traditional route to market there. And my final thought, Will, is that actually it's the labour costs that are the problem, not getting the cargo bikes. That's the bit that's very hard to cover, as Slav and Rob and Lee will tell you in great detail. Right, now then, Emerson Ford asks, Ross, have you got a project coming up in Soho? Short answer, please.
We have had a project that's been running in Soho for the last year. With CAV4, we are working in Westminster, but that's not been absolutely decided where yet. But there is a current project going on in Soho. So if you do want to get in touch about that, then please let us know afterwards as well, because I think we've got a cargo bike scheme there running very soon.
Thank you.
That at least going on at the moment. I will check. Happy to talk after.
Right. There's a load of questions coming in. Melissa Vento, Giles Gibson, to do with the hubs, consolidation centres. Let's try and do it to 2 questions short. How do you go about choosing a location? What are the factors? And what do you reckon the operating radius is from a hub? Rob, would you mind starting?
Sure. Well, question of choice. I think it's more about what's available. Is what we found. Our perfect place we found was about Buckingham Palace. Didn't think the Queen was after giving us any space there. So certainly in somewhere like London, space is premium, and you get what you're given a little bit. Certainly some lobbying would be great on behalf of government to have strategic micro hubs in cities. I think that's really important. From our experience, operational areas, 3-mile radius for us is our max. In fact, we're just putting together how many hubs we need in central London and a solution to cover the whole of London through a network of hubs. But we don't think anything more than that. You start that efficiency line between what a van can do well and what a cargo bike can do well, we think starts moving in about 3-mile radius. It's from our experience.
Yeah, and I would reinforce that during lockdown. I know of a cyclogistics operation where they had to pretty much take anything that came because their traditional source of parcels dried up due to lockdown and COVID, and they ended up doing much greater distances, and it was a nightmare. Now then, Slav, what about you? So have you got any views about hub location and radius, distance?
Well, with radius, I think, as Rob mentioned, something between 3 and 5 miles. I would say it depends a lot on how central we are. Obviously, 3 miles from Pimlico is very different from 3 miles from Hammersmith. And if we want to make make this work. It's the micro hub that Rob was mentioning is clearly the solution, because a bit on the, I think that was the first question, how can a cargo bike compete with a van? The way that a cargo bike competes with a van is to have several pickups during the day, because clearly the cargo bike can deliver faster than a van in central London. Zone 1 and Zone 2, there's absolutely no competition between the delivery that they can do. If you think about delivering in Pimlico in a car, or Victoria, you're not going to deliver anything in 1 hour. So if we have those hubs, even if they are very small locations all over the city, the riders can quickly deliver 20 parcels or whatever it is that they can carry, come back again, and they can do that in an 8-hour shift very easily. And that's actually what we do. And yes, I think the idea is to expand with those options, but obviously London is prime estate, so it's not the easiest way.
And just, you put it on the chat, but it won't have gone to everybody. So EcoFleet have got about 160 hours available for Soho locations in Soho and North Bank under the Clean Air Villages project.
Yeah,
now,
so
just a quick update on licensing. The reason that Wheezy were before the magistrates and the council in Brighton was because, of course, they needed an alcohol license. Hence the question to Grace. I now realise what the 2 and 2 is there. We're going to start to wrap up now. I think that there was quite a few technical questions come up which we haven't answered yet, but which we can do, by the way. Those people who may be a bit disappointed we haven't got to your question, but we can do. And certainly it was fair to say that as little as 5 years ago, we really probably couldn't have held this webinar covering the range of topics to the depth that we have done. Things are really moving very rapidly now, and cargo bikes are taking off the length and breadth of the country. Certainly we've sold cargo bikes and trailers as far north as Nairn in Scotland and down to Exeter. So we really are covering the whole country now. I'd like to thank all the speakers for sticking to time and being interesting. I'd like to thank Landor for organising this, because I know exactly how much work Juliana and Mark have put in. It's very hard work. I'd like to thank City Changer Cargo Bike Project and Raleigh for sponsoring it. And I would remind you that to keep an eye out for another session coming up in May. And Juliana and Mark have got your email. They'll send you information about it. So without further ado, I will bring this to a close. Goodbye and have a good ride.